Hi, my name is Fairylocked. Now, you might be thinking what this exactly means, so let's not waste any time and get right into the introductory video. If you enjoy, leave a like and thanks for watching. Enjoy! To put it simple, I am locked to only step and train in chunks that contain a fairy ring. It sounds simple, but figuring everything out wasn't that evident. Let's take a look at all the chunks. I will keep it brief and not go in depth into every chunk, that way you, the audience, can still be surprised by some tactics I will use in the future. First off, we have what I like to call the useless chunks. These chunks offer nothing that can be done elsewhere more efficiently. Thus, these chunks will largely be ignored during this series. These next three chunks are far more interesting. In these, we will spend most of our time training skills like fishing, woodcutting, hunter, and more. From left to right, these are the Piscatoris hunting area, the Sinclair mansion north of CS Village, and the surroundings of the Legends Guild. Unfortunately, we will not be able to enter the guild itself. Next off, we have some very luckily placed chunks. As you can see, there are two fairy rings, one in the Ardung Zoo and the Unicorn Cage, and one on an island southwest of Draenor Village. On their own, these chunks would be worthless as we can only travel by fairy ring. But, as chance would have it, they are directly next to another chunk that contains an accessible ring. This means we can simply walk from chunk to chunk. For Ardung, this is the Tower of Life ring, which opens the Ardung Market, a huge source of variety of stuff. For Draenor Village, this is the ring just south of the Wizard Tower. Both Ardung and Draenor Village also have a dungeon access that leads into the same chunk dungeon. Now, those two dungeons are not that useful, so we'll probably not use them. Speaking of dungeons, we can also access those at Edgeville and the Releka Slayer Cave. Since the dungeons themselves largely overlap in positioning in the chunk, we can use parts of them as well. For Edgeville, this provides us with some skeletons and zombies. For Releka, this opens up Slayer monsters, for which we will have to lamp our Slayer skill. Whatever could these monsters hold for us that is worth all that waiting? In Morytania, there are 4 fairy rings. The ring just west of Ganefis is also the only one with a farming patch, so look forward to that raking content. There's a variety of other things to do in the next two, but let's not flood the first episode with 200 IQ theory crafting. The 4th chunk is only accessible after 50 agility is reached, so we'll have to wait and see if this will be feasible. On Great Kourend, we have in total 3 rings, but only 2 useful ones. In the Chasms of Fire, we can find several layers filled with demons. There is also access to shamans, but since these require 100% shades in favor, we'll have to see if this will ever be possible. Next are 8 general chunks. These are certainly not useless, but besides some hunter spots, rock crabs, and a house portal that requires 50 construction, there's not much more to see here. Since the Calphite dungeon continues into another chunk, the Queen is fortunately not within our grasp. This next chunk might be a bit controversial, but I decided to add it nonetheless. Technically, the shack in Lumbridge Swamps acts as a fairy ring and you can travel back to it using a fairy ring. In Zanaris itself, there are 3 fairy rings, opening the entire northern section of Zanaris, and what's most interesting here is that we can find the Slaymaster Chalda. Although I doubt we will ever be able to complete the task, we will try nonetheless. In Zanaris, we can also find the portal to Puro Puro, which we will of course utilize. Implinks open up a lot of content and possibilities. We won't only have access to Gileno and its moon Zanaris, we will also be accessing some different realms. If you know what we find in these, you already know what we will be hunting here, especially the 4th chunk will be interesting one for more than one reason. Now for the realm of the Fisher King, we will have to complete a quest or 2, so we will check on that later. And finally, we have 2 chunks that have some special unlock requirements. For Miscellanea, we will need to complete the Fremnic Trials. Funnily enough, this is also the only chunk with an anvil, so doing this quest will be on the list of exceptions. Of course, we will need to get all the requirements within our allowed fairy chunks. For the Karambuan spot, we will allow ourselves to finish Taibur 1 Trio, but only once we have achieved 65 fishing in the other chunks. This also means we will have to complete Jungle Potion and preceding that Druidic Ritual. This way we will only be able to start running Herblore once 65 fishing is reached. Of course, to unlock fairy rings we need to start Fairy Tale Part 2. Now most of the requirements for the preceding quests can easily be achieved in the fairy chunks with the exception of one. 31 crafting for Lost City for making the Draven Staff. So, while training my combat stats and gathering supplies in the whitelisted chunks, I did a lot of theory crafting and thinking. I decided to start by completing Mystalian Mystery, a quest that starts in a fairy chunk and completely takes place in an instance. From this, we will get 6 crafting. From there on, I will be using charter ships to glassblow until level 15, and once 15 crafting is reached, there is a steady method of gaining experience within our chunks. If you guessed what this is before the next episode comes out, kudos to you. Before we end the episode though, there is something important we need to discuss, the endgame of this account. Well, as luck would have it, there is a last chunk we haven't discussed yet. This one can be found in the Tsar city. Here we can eventually get obsidian armor, access to a rune shop, and one very difficult minigame, the fight caves. Thanks for watching and see you in the next episode. If you enjoyed the video, feel free to leave a like and subscribe.